So you finally decided to follow your dreams and start a YouTube channel or pursue a career in video production, and you're looking to buy your first ever camera body. You need a camera body that's not gonna break the bank, but still need to be able to take high-end images. Well, this could be the one. This is the Sony A6700, and even though it's approaching its 1-year anniversary, it's still one of the greatest cameras on the market, especially when you're considering value to dollars. Which is obviously something you do need to consider when you're starting out, because you don't want the added stress of having a whole bunch of debt because of all of the gear you've acquired. The Sony A6700 is the latest of the APS-C camera series from Sony. And if you're new to the camera world, you're often gonna hear people comparing APS-C to full frame. And what they're talking about here is sensor size. The sensor on a camera is what's capturing the light and converting it into an image. And the bigger the sensor, the better your image is gonna be. As well, you're gonna have better low light performance, more dynamic range, and you'll get more of a shallow depth of field, getting that nice bokeh. Now, even though the Sony A6700 is a APS-C camera with a sensor 1.5 times smaller than a full frame camera, it doesn't mean that it's all bad. There's actually a lot of perks when it comes to an APS-C camera. First, APS-C cameras and their lenses are just way more affordable, as well just way smaller, which makes it a lot more convenient if you're traveling or hiking, or say you're out doing street photography and you don't want to be as noticed with a huge camera setup. It can just make it a lot more convenient. As well, you get a greater reach with your focal length because an APS-C camera has a 1.5 times crop factor, which means, for example, if you have a 70-200 lens, it's actually a 105 to 300 millimeter lens, which is great if you do want to get into sports photography or wildlife photography without breaking the bank. Because we all know that really crazy telephoto lenses can actually cost just thousands of dollars, and when you're just starting out, you probably don't have that much money to dish out. So there are perks to having an APS-C camera for sure. Now let's talk specifically some of the specs that's coming in the A6700. And I thought while I'm showing all the specs, I would show some of the footage that I shot already with the A6700 on my recent trip to Poland. I took the camera along with me when we were out hiking just to vlog and film some B-roll. So take a look, enjoy the footage, and as well, we're gonna talk about the specs of this camera. So first, the Sony A6700 has a 26 megapixel back illuminated APS-C sensor, which gives added low light performance. It's also got 14 stops of dynamic range when recording video, and it has that AI-based real-time autofocus technology that we're used to in Sony cameras, which really helps with that accurate tracking and subject recognition. It's gonna have human recognition tracking onto your eye or different wildlife or birds, getting you the focus that you want. When it comes to photos, we can shoot 11 frames per second for mechanical and silent shutter. When it comes to raw photos, which is great if you're shooting wildlife or sports photography. When it comes to video, you're getting 6K oversampled footage compressed into a 4K full pixel readout, meaning you're getting a really high quality 4K footage. It's gonna be filmed at 422 10-bit, meaning it has a lot of colors, and you can film 4K 60 frames per second all the way up to 120 frames per second. At 120 frames per second, there is a 1.5 times crop, but at 4K 60 frames per second, you are getting that full width oversample from 6K. You are as well getting 240 frames per second at 1080 HD, which I won't do too often, but for some people, it might be important. The A6700 as well has advanced stabilization of up to 5 stops. And when it comes to low light performance, it's got a native ISO at 800 and 2500, so either shoot at 800 ISO, or if you're not having enough light, just crank it all the way up to 2500, reducing the most amount of noise. Something that I'm really glad that they added into the A6700 is a flipped LCD screen, because it's really important when you're filming yourself, or say you're shooting photo or video from up high or down low, you need to be able to tilt the screen to see what the composition is. Whereas back in the day with the older A series, like the 6500, 6600, it just had that tilt screen, which some people like, but I prefer as a content creator and vlogger much more the flip LCD screen. The A6700 as well has S-Log2, S-Log3, and S-Cinetone, and as well you have assignable user LUTs. All these are different picture profiles that you can use to get more dynamic range and flexibility when you're color grading your footage. It might sound a little bit overwhelming or daunting, but it's actually not that bad, so I'd highly recommend testing out and figure out what it's like to shoot with a log picture profile. Really, you're getting a lot of the premium features in the Sony A6700 that we're used to, for example, in the Sony A7S III or the FX3, but at just much more affordable price. As well, a huge bonus is that when you are gonna have to invest in lenses, they're gonna be a lot more affordable and a lot smaller. Some things that I also really enjoyed about the A6700 is the battery grip. I feel like it's a lot bigger, which is nicer because you can actually hold it firmly in your hand. And as well, I like the fact that it has 3 dials. So you have the front dial, which I set to shutter speed. You have the back dial here for aperture. And then I like to use the back dial for ISO. Something that I really did not enjoy about, for example, the Sony ZV-E1 was the fact that it didn't have those 3 dials. So you pretty much just had to use the flip LCD screen to adjust all your settings when it comes to shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And I just don't like that. I don't think that's very fast or flexible, whereas when you have the 3 dials, you can just quickly change your settings to get the right exposure for your shots. Just to give you an example of what the A6700 is capable of when it comes to photo and video, I went outside and just took a few shots of myself. Here's 4K 25 per second. 50 frames per second. I'm filming those frame rates because I am here in Europe and I'm using PAL. And here's the before and after of these shots color graded. I did notice while color grading that there was less flexibility and dynamic range than I'm used to, for example, with the A7S III, but still it was possible to color grade the footage. If you did like the looks of these clips, I actually used my own Cinema LUT collection, which is a collection that has 10 different grading LUTs and as well a conversion LUT, and it goes for 50 bucks. And I'll link it below right here so you can just click that link up there and check them out. These Cinema LUTs I'm using on a daily basis, and they honestly speed up my whole color grading process so much and gives you that nice congruent look for all your projects. So I highly recommend checking them out. And again, I appreciate you for supporting my channel by grabbing them. Because the A6700 is a hybrid camera, I also shot some photos of myself, and here's the edited version. And in my opinion, I think they look pretty dang good. And last, I took some stabilization test shots. I shot them at 25 frames per second and 50 frames per second at just the normal stabilization. And then these clips were then filmed with the boost stabilization. It crops in a little bit, but it is more stable with that setting on. Now for some of the cons of the Sony A6700. Some people did say they had issues with overheating, especially when they're filming at 120 frames per second. I didn't run into that problem, but if you do, you can go to a setting in the menu by increasing the threshold of heat in your camera. So just go there to turn it on high, and then you're not gonna face the overheating as easily. Something else that some people might struggle with is the fact that there's only one memory card slot in the A6700. So if you're on a professional shoot, shooting photos, you can't have a backup of your photos. And last, while this camera does have some level of weather sealing, it's not as robust and high-end as other cameras, meaning if you're out in really extreme conditions, like say you're in Iceland where it's just pissing rain sideways, you might want to be a little bit more careful about how wet your camera gets. Despite these cons, all the pros of the Sony A6700 gets even more impressive when you hear the price. This camera body goes for $1,400 US. Now don't get me wrong, that is still a lot of money, but when you compare it to its big brothers like the Sony A7S III, which I'm using, or the FX3, you're looking at prices of $3,200 all the way up to $3,700, which is a lot more money than $1,400. Not to mention, you're also gonna be able to buy lenses that are a lot more affordable for this camera compared to full frame cameras. So in the long run, you're gonna be saving a lot of money and still getting a lot of value with the Sony A6700. So if you're starting a YouTube channel or you wanna get into video production, I think this is a great camera body for you. And then later on down the road, when you've made more money from doing this craft, then you can consider buying, for example, a full frame camera, investing money into that. So who can I recommend the Sony A6700 for? Well, first off, for anyone starting a YouTube channel and getting into content creation, this is definitely a great camera, high-end quality, flipped LCD screen. It's got really what you need. As well, for anyone who does a lot of travel content or hiking or street photography where you want to have a very minimal, small, compact setup that's not very noticeable, or for anyone who wants to get into wildlife or sports photography and needs to have that really long focal length without breaking the bank, this camera is for you. Once again, thank you for watching this whole video. If you did enjoy it and you felt like I was providing value, make sure you hit that subscribe button because I'd love to have you here, a part of this community.